Welcome to this episode of the Cover Stories podcast. I'm your host this week, Cipher Brief CEO and publisher Suzanne Kelly. Many of you who know me know that I'm obsessed with the art of storytelling, and particularly how it reaches so deeply into the national security world. This week, I'm talking with former CIA Officer Gus Kangas, who knew from his time in the ROTC in college that he wanted to be an intelligence officer. But a convergence of the intelligence mission, advances in technology, COVID, and a CIA tragedy in Coast Afghanistan at the end of 2009 turned him toward Hollywood, which later opened the door for him to offer his experience as a consultant on the Paramount Plus show, The Agency. That's the show on Paramount Plus that I've been binging lately, starring Michael Fassbender and Richard Gere among a cast of other very talented actors. Given his journey from the CIA to Hollywood, I wanted to start at the beginning with Gus. We have a lot of mutual connections, a lot of people we know in common who come from the world of national security, espionage, CIA, all of that. We've never met before, which is hard to believe. But when I first started seeing, you mentioned here and there, it was really about sort of, your government background. You spent about 28 years, you were in the Air Force, you worked at the State Department, and then you transitioned over to the CIA and the Directorate of Operations. Tell me a little bit about your government service.
Yeah, of course. So as you noted, I started out in the Air Force. I did ROTC back when I was at university as an undergraduate at Boston University. And I learned towards the end of my time at school that I was going to be an intelligence officer. And like any great story, there's always an origin. And this origin story, I had a professor, Art Holnick, who had been an Air Force case officer and then had joined the CIA and become an officer in the Directorate of Operations. And he was one of my professors and someone that I looked up to at school. And so I realized as I was going and embarking on this journey into the Air Force that ultimately I wanted to be Art Holnick when I grew up. And so I made it my mission when I went active duty to do that. But of course, you can't get there from here. And so it took a couple of different tours. I went to South Korea and served at Osan Air Base. And then from there, I went into Air Force Special Operations and was actually the first Air Force intelligence officer with a combat control pararescue unit, a special tactics squadron out of Mildenhall. And it was there that I finally had that opportunity. And so I pursued it. So did that in the Air Force for a while. And then as you noted, I was in Bosnia back during the after the Dayton Accords, after the war, and ran into a bunch of similar-aged diplomats from our embassy in Sarajevo, and realized there was this whole other aspect of a career that I could pursue, and so I decided to do that, and I joined State Department, and I was a state officer, a foreign service officer, for several years. And it got me to go to another part of the world that I'd never been, which was Africa, and absolutely loved it. But while I was in the embassy, then I got to work with our colleagues in the station, Director of Operations officers. And it was very natural then for me to want to go back to this dream of being Art Holnick. And so then I left the Department of State and I joined the CIA, the Directorate of Operations, where I then spent the next 22 years as a case officer, going all over the world. And it was obviously right after 9/11. So there was a lot of work to be done in the counterterrorism realm, but then also still a lot of work to be done against our, state actor peer adversaries. So spent the career doing that. And towards the very end of that career, came back to Washington, and I had been our deputy in Coast back in 2009, 2010. And obviously we know what happened, unfortunately, during that time period, and realized I wanted to figure out a way that we could continue to still do the work that we do, the important work that we do, but not necessarily always have to put our officers in a position of danger, in a position where another incident like what happened at Coast might happen. And so I really started to leverage technology, and I embraced aspects of the entertainment industry in a way to create a capability that would potentially allow us to do just that. And when the pandemic hit and a lot of our colleagues were stymied in their ability to move and operate, just given the lockdown internationally, I was able to continue to help support our mission through this burgeoning capability. And so it was a window into the creativity and the imagination that you can really harness with the entertainment industry. And so when I retired from the government after the 28 years, I ended up actually going into a work where I was able to then further access and leverage the innovation, the technology, the dual use of some of that from Hollywood into bringing that back into government and national security spaces.
So I have a little secret I feel like we have to reveal for the audience, Gus, and that is that, and I'm not a math, major here by any means, but 28 years in government service, but 40 years as an actor. Now, I'm pretty sure you can't be over the age of about 24 based on how you look.
That's very flattering.
So you had a side gig going on while you were working for government, and talk to us about your passion for acting and how you kind of took that along with you and all the different jobs you had. Like, how did that actually come to fruition?
So I may be older than I look, but I really do appreciate that, Susan. I actually started out as a child actor. So well before I even realized that I had a future in government, I was doing commercials. I was on auditions. I was from New Jersey originally. So when all the other kids were going off to soccer practice or Little League, I was actually going to New York with my mom, and I was taking tap and jazz lessons and voice lessons. And so I started out doing commercials and then some voiceovers. I was background in a number of films, some of which we may have seen. And then I had an opportunity to originate a character in Summer Stock Theater up in New Hampshire at the American Stage Festival. Mm-hmm. And I loved it. I loved all of it. I loved the ability to create and to be surrounded as a kid around so many really interesting adults. I loved the travel aspect of it. There was a time where I got to understudy for a character that ultimately we went to Broadway with it. And I got a tutor. Because, of course, if you're constantly rehearsing for performances that are actually going on during a school year, you're going to have to do that. And it opened my eyes to a lot of really unique and interesting opportunities. But the thing that I loved the most was storytelling. And so that 100% is a common theme throughout my career. Certainly with the agency was the ability and recognizing this power of storytelling. And how, as we know, for good and for bad, emotionally compelling stories can really move people to action.
It's so important. It's so important no matter what you're doing, I think. And that's been a real focus of the Cipher Brief lately, just with the upcoming Cipher Brief Honors Dinner. And we're honoring Walter Parks, who built DreamWorks Studios, of course, with Steven Spielberg. Right. But just on the power of storytelling, he wrote in the movie War Games. I don't know if you ever
remember War Games.
Everybody's seen War Games, but it actually led then President Ronald Reagan to understand what a risk we had within the Department of Defense when it came to securing the computers that ran our nuclear programs. So kind of a big deal. Storytelling really does have impact in real life, right?
100%. I mean, you'll recall, I think it was the day after tomorrow, that changed our nuclear policy as a government with regards to a previous idea of mutually assured destruction to really looking at reducing the number of nuclear weapons and actually looking at what became the SALT treaties and then START because of the impact that what a post-apocalyptic nuclear catastrophe in the United States would mean and how that moved audiences. And those audiences, some of those members obviously were members of Congress, members of the executive branch, and it really changed the way that we looked at what nuclear war could really mean. So no, I agree. I think that storytelling is critically important now, especially with technology in our hands. Right now we have nonstop 24/7 stories being told to us. And I think it's really important that we recognize the power of that.
Let's touch on that for a minute, because you mentioned technology a couple of times already. And you mentioned that while you were deployed overseas and then through COVID, you were really thinking about the use of technology differently. And I'm assuming you mean not only to carry on kind of the mission, but also in the sense of storytelling and reaching more people. Talk to me a little bit more about how you think about technology now.
Yeah. I mean, technology, it's always going to be a double-edged sword, right? There's going to be opportunities, and then there are also going to be obstacles and challenges. And I think that for the opportunities, it certainly gives us an ability to, one, collect information, right? So open source intelligence now is more important than ever. And as a 22 plus year veteran of the Directorate of Operations, I truly believe that a lot of times we should be the collector of last resort rather than the first choice. And when you have technology at your fingertips that allows you to collect a lot of publicly available information, then you're able to refine down specifically those things that you still need to know that may require only one type of collection capability to get you there. And then that could be using someone like myself from the Directorate of Operations. But you get such a refined understanding of what specifically you need by being able to first look at the vast amount of data that's already out there and make sense of it. Yeah. So I think there's a great example of how you can do a lot of the heavy lift with technology and then be able to surgically use the capabilities you need afterward, knowing what you already have access to. And then on the opposite side, on the obstacle, the challenge, now more than ever, everyone has access to information. And they're going to make decisions based on what they see. And not always is that information going to be accurate or vetted or trusted. And in fact, a lot of times it may be purposely put out there to as disinformation or misinformation with an intent towards moving an individual or a state towards making decisions that they might not otherwise make. And so there are challenges with that, which again goes back to why it is so critically important then that we do have the ability to critically look and analyze that information and then fill in the gaps with hopefully credible information when we need to, so that we can make sure that what we're seeing is actually something that we can believe.
You hit on kind of a sore spot for me, Gus, which is so much technology, so much information at our fingertips. We don't think anymore. We don't critically think anymore. We simply see something, and if it makes a little bit of sense, we believe it, whether it's true or not. We've lost the ability to understand how to question what we see. And therefore, you've got operations like disinformation campaigns that are so easy, so cheap to launch, and so many people fall for them because there's an element of both truth, even though a small one, and an element of common sense in a lot of this stuff that we're seeing. Does that kind of worry you about how information is spreading these days?
It does, and especially because, again, there are algorithms in the background that are helping to cluster like-minded groups together in ways now that before there was the internet, you always had individuals that may think a certain way, but it was really difficult for them to find and share that information with other like-minded individuals in other parts of the world. And now there's algorithms that are actually facilitating that, making sure that they can get access to that information. And so once you've identified certain groups that already may think, either conspiratorially or for other reasons, that some of the information that you're putting out there could be true, well, now you're amplifying it and you're providing an echo chamber for them. And in some ways, they feel validated in their beliefs. And so that then can increase because now you're spreading that information to a larger audience. You're connecting like-minded groups together. And again, as we've seen, because people now don't critically think and they just accept what's been given to them, there's an opportunity to just spoon feed people more and more disinformation, and it amplifies their own or preconceived ideas about what these issues are and what they believe to be true. Yeah. So yeah, it does. It worries me a lot, especially, as a father. I've got a 20-year-old and a 14-year-old, and they get their news from TikTok, or they get their news and their information from social media platforms. And I'm worried about that because unless they trust but verify, unless they go back to thinking about multiple sources and cross-referencing that information, which requires effort on their part, they could otherwise just assume that what they're seeing is true.
Yeah, that's what's so scary is that really a lot of the responsibility is on the receiver of the information to actually go and ask and question and do research. And most of us just aren't going to do it given our busy lives. And it's, that's what's so scary about all this.
The future of national security is here. Introducing the Cipher Brief's NatSec Edge Conference, June 5th through 6th, 2025 in Austin, Texas. Join leaders from intelligence, defense, private industry, and investment as they explore the innovations shaping tomorrow's world. Gain critical insights, connect with top minds, and shape the future of security in an interconnected world. Don't just witness the future, be a part of it. Secure your spot now at natsekedge.com.
Let's get back to the sort of more fun Hollywood side of it for just a minute. You retired from government service, and most recently came on my radar because you are working as a consultant on a show that we've been watching at the Cipher Brief on Amazon Prime called The Agency. And this show, if you haven't seen it, stars Michael Fassbender and Jodie Turner-Smith. It's a really interesting kind of spy thriller with a whole lot of twists and turns. Gus, what does it mean to be a consultant on a show like that? And what do you actually do?
Yeah. So first of all, it was a great opportunity. And the reason that I was actually interested in doing it was the director, Joe Wright, who, as we know, he did The Darkest Hour, Atonement, a couple of other shows that I think the audience might be familiar with. He's all about authenticity. And so when we had a conversation early on before I joined the project, it was very evident to me that he really wanted to strike the balance between good storytelling, but also realism and authenticity about what it would mean to be someone like the characters in The Agency, the psychological toll that it can take on an individual when you're living a double life, when you're out there under a specific cover and you're trying to collect information in a safe and secure manner, but also doing it overseas in an unknown environment. And so that really appealed to me. It resonated with me because even though we are all entertained by a lot of the different types of spy and espionage films that are out there, a lot of times it's the excitement, it's the explosions, it's the Lear jets, it's a lot of fun, but it's not realistic, right? It's not really an authentic portrayal of what the day-to-day life would be for someone like myself. Mm-hmm. And so as a consultant, what I was able to do was really work collaboratively with the entire team. And so it started with pre-production with the set design folks who wanted to try to make the set, especially the station, as authentic as it possibly could be. It worked with costume design to make sure, is the clothing right? Would someone wear a smartwatch? Would they not wear a smartwatch? And why wouldn't they perhaps wear a smartwatch? It then went into the script and the different episodes, and just it was an opportunity for me to help look at certain situations and just give my opinion as to what I thought was realistic and what still might not be. And again, obviously, it's a Hollywood production, so there is going to be drama, and sometimes good storytelling will supersede authenticity. But there was a lot of opportunities to share my thoughts on what I thought. As an example, the relationship between the main character, Martian, that Michael Fassbender plays, and his daughter, Poppy. In the story, which the audience may or may not know, the main character is away from his daughter for 6 years overseas. Yeah. And when he leaves, she's 10. And so when he comes back, she's 16. I mean, she's a woman at that point. And just to imagine what kind of toll that takes on an individual or on the family, and the sacrifices that individuals make in order to continue to execute the mission and support while they're out there on the relationship with their family members, spouses, children. So for me, it was really important. And I was really happy to be a part of striking that balance with the characters of Martian and Poppy and the way they interacted. And obviously the resentment that there is there from her part, not really understanding what her father did while he was overseas. Her dad's inability to really explain in any great detail, obviously, what that was. But still there's that tension and friction but there's also that love.
Yeah, it's definitely a show that is really rich on sort of relationships between characters and personalities and how those play into the broader mission too, just as you've described that great one between sort of father and daughter. I'm wondering how much, once you saw the final show aired, how much did you think Hollywood crept in there, and how much were you thinking if you had to rate it on the authenticity scale, what would you put it?
I mean, out of a scale of 1 to 10, I'll definitely say it's 7, maybe, even higher towards an 8. And when it comes obviously to the character-driven nature of the dialogue and the characters, obviously there needs to be action. Otherwise, you're not going to captivate an audience only with, really good dialogue. I would say some of the areas, and again, it just happens that way. For the record, the agency does not beat its assets. We don't hit them. We, in fact, as you know, from I'm sure other things that you work on with us, there's a sacred bond there between a handling officer and their asset. But again, that would be the Hollywood dramatization of the project. A couple of other things too, obviously little things. We aren't the military, so we don't say sir and ma'am normally when we interact, even with senior officials. A lot of times we just refer to someone as chief. So it's those little things, but that's okay. I'm happy that it's the nuances, the little things that only maybe someone who's spent an entire career doing something like that is going to pick up on. Because for me, it's then more important that your general audience can at least appreciate and feel like they're getting a window into some of the other aspects of what someone goes through in a job like the one that the characters that we watch in this show endure.
Focus on the bigger picture.
Yeah.
Well, now that you're sort of out in Hollywood again, you've also started something new where I think you're the chief
strategy officer. Yeah.
Strategy officer for Vigilant Pictures.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of folks have kind of retired and thought, well, maybe I could try my hand at Hollywood, but they found it a lot harder than a lot of people think it is.
Yeah.
How has it been for you? And tell us about sort of the lead up and the launch of Vigilant Pictures.
Yeah. So as I mentioned earlier, when I was still in the government and I had been looking at leveraging the entertainment industry and leveraging and harnessing some of that creativity to help come back in the government spaces, because again, we've got, as you know, super smart people across the government. But it's challenging at times with the pace of business and sometimes the bureaucracy to really find time to think creatively, to take a moment and, we say think outside the box on topics. And so it was through that effort that I met a couple of really gifted storytellers who, before I met them, had already started to think along the lines of creating a media company that would be focused and dedicated to telling authentic stories about real heroes, not superheroes. And I would say it harkens back to the 80s. If you remember, we had movies like Top Gun and Rambo and Red Dawn. And yes, they were Hollywood. They were fantastic in the way that these stories were portrayed, but they were also inspirational. I remember a couple of years after Top Gun, I think the recruitment for Navy and Air Force pilots went through the roof. Because people wanted to be like that. They wanted to be inspired. They wanted to have hope about a thing that was greater than themselves. And I feel like now is a great time to go back and revisit some of those kinds of stories. Because again, we're in a time right now that I think is very challenging. And it's difficult at times, I think, to appreciate who we are and what we stand for. And again, to go back to the idea that storytelling is so important to help because it entertains, but it should also, you should leave a show, I think, invoked with new ideas or thinking about how would I have been in that situation. And so that's what our mission is. And that's what we've set ourselves out to do, is to tell these types of authentic stories. And they're not going to just be, military or intelligence related, because we know heroes, they come in all shapes and sizes. They're the firefighters during the LA fires. They're the first responders during the pandemic. They're the folks that are helping after there's some sort of natural disaster like hurricanes and tornadoes. They're all different. Or they're people who just, unfortunately, they survive a terrorist attack because they're in the wrong place at the wrong time. And even though they themselves would never say that they're heroes, how they acted was heroically. And if there's an opportunity to tell some of these stories to inspire a next generation of folks to think more about servant leadership and the ability to be a part of something greater than just themselves, then I think that's a noble cause that I'm willing to pursue. And it's also going to be fun and entertaining.
Yeah. And you're already working on a first project, right? A documentary?
Yeah. So there's a number of colleagues that we used to work with when I was still a staff officer in Afghanistan. And as we know, when we left Afghanistan and we left HKIA, a number of them came with us and are now going through their own journey. And they're proud to have served and worked side by side with us. They love America, and they're here now, and they're going through different stages of finding their way. Mm-hmm. And, some of them are working, others are in that process of getting their green cards, and they all have stories to share and tell. And so there's an NGO called Famil, and they are dedicated to helping these individuals as they resettle themselves here and they find a future for themselves to continue to serve and continue to contribute to our national security here in the U.S., be it working with DHS or FBI or whomever they might be working with. They've got great language skills, obviously. And so this is an opportunity through a documentary to help give them a voice and give them a platform so that they can share their story. Because I think a lot of Americans don't realize that it wasn't just us in Afghanistan that helped to prevent another 9/11 from happening here on U.S. soil, but it was our Afghan partners as well.
Yeah, many of these really, truly are unsung heroes. I think just given what they sacrificed in order to help the United States. I'm looking forward to seeing the final product of that documentary soon. Do you have any advice for other folks like you with similar backgrounds who think, gosh, now that I've hit a retirement age, but I'm not done working yet, I'd like to try my hand at something more creative? What would you tell them?
Yeah, I would say, first of all, be tenacious. Especially in a career in government, I often joke you got to kiss a lot of frogs. Right? There's you just can't take no for an answer. And so be tenacious, believe in yourself, have the confidence in all those skills that you acquired while you were serving in the government, and realize that you have a voice and you have probably some interesting stories. Now, mind you, make sure you go through all the appropriate ways of getting those stories cleared so that you can share them, but know that you have stories and that those stories can inspire others. And you can continue to serve this country and our mission. It's in a different way, a different capacity, but it's still service and it's still working towards making this place better and leaving it better than we found it. So,
yeah, I think that's excellent advice. Gus Kangas, I want to thank you so much for stopping by the Cover Stories podcast in the Cipher Brief studio and kind of sharing some of your stories. I hope we get to keep in touch and follow along with your success now that you're in the entertainment space.
Susan, again, thank you so much. It's been a real privilege and honor today to meet with you. And I loved sharing these stories, and hopefully there'll be many more to share. So I look forward to staying in touch as well. And we'll see you. We'll be in touch.
This is now your business. Thanks so much, guys.
Thanks, Suzanne.